All right, welcome to our Course Companion Song of Prayer class. Today we are covering Chapter 2, Section 2, Forgiveness to Destroy. This section is yet another reminder of just what an absolutely incredible collection of wisdom the Song of Prayer is. It is so good. You can hardly even believe it exists, and it's so good. I really wish it were in the CE. Last week, we were introduced to the idea that, as the section says, no gift of heaven has been more misunderstood than forgiveness. And as Robert and I were saying this morning, this is so often because the gift of heaven that forgiveness is meant to be oftentimes comes in the form of love, or form that looks like love, but the content is hate. And we are going to get more into that idea today. One thing I should say before I get to the prayer is that I do recognize that the Song of Prayer commentary in the membership site is incomplete, and we are working to address that now. I hope to have all of that up to date by the end of the weekend. So thanks for your patience as we work through all of that. If you do not have the Song of Prayer commentaries thus far and you would like to receive them over email, they're coming on Thursdays, then please send an email to info@circleofaid.org and we will add you to the list. Okay, I think that's it for the housekeeping. Let's get to our prayer. If you would, please close your eyes and take a deep breath with me. Our prayer for today is going to be a hybrid of my words and the words, the beautiful prayer from lesson 359 in the course. So, dear God, thank you for the opportunity to come together today as loving friends and mighty companions on this remarkable path of light. We surrender this gathering to you and we ask that it serve your purposes and be blessed by you. Dear God, help us to truly see with love, to see with gentle eyes that look beyond all forms of madness and rest peacefully on truth. And from this place, God, may we be miracle workers, healers who bring the light of forgiveness to an insane world. Father, today we will forgive your world and let creation be your own. We have misunderstood all things, but we have not made sinners of the holy sons of God. What you created sinless, so abides forever and ever. Such are we. And we rejoice to learn that we have made mistakes which have no real effects on us. Sin is impossible, and on this fact, forgiveness rests upon a certain base more solid than the shadow of the world we see. Help us forgive, for we would be redeemed. Help us forgive, for we would be at peace. Amen.
Amen. Okay. You've been getting these reminders via email, but I would really encourage you, if you don't have the Song of Prayer itself. Now, I'm sure most of you do. It's in the third edition of the FIP course. If you have that, you've got it. If you don't have that, you should consider getting a copy it's just the Song of Prayer by itself. It's not combined with psychotherapy, right, Emily?
Is it? Let's see.
Yeah. So
Just Song of Prayer. I'm
yeah,
seeing it for
Jackie's
Rosalie and
holding it up.
Jackie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Rosalie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can get it for like $6 on the Foundation for Inner Peace site. And I'm also told it's on
ACIM.org.
Amazon as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And Ken and Lois are showing off their copy.
We tried to get it in the CE.
Yeah, we did recently.
We tried. Swing and a miss.
Okay. So we are, of course, in chapter 2 on forgiveness. And this is, I'm so glad we're doing this. This is really like clarifying for me what the course is saying about forgiveness. And I know I've been with the course for a very long time, done a lot of study on forgiveness, done a lot of practicing of forgiveness. But I think what happens is forgiveness, as the course sees it, is so not of this world that even when you take it straight out of the course, your mind kind of dilutes it and alters it and mixes it a bit with your mindset. And you kind of pull it down to where it can, fit in with your ego a bit more. And then it's not quite the real thing. And what this chapter is really arguing for is keeping forgiveness as the pure gift from heaven that it really is. I think one of the reasons that, for instance, psychology didn't study forgiveness until about 30 years ago is it's been considered the province of religion, not psychology. And I think the reason for that is not that mysterious. I think it's because forgiveness within normal worldly terms doesn't make sense. And so we need a justification for it that is not of this world, which religion provides. When we try to make it something just of this world, it kind of stops making sense. We get into some strange, I think, compromises. So what this chapter is really arguing for, and you see it so strongly in this section, is letting forgiveness stay. You could say stay as this pure shaft of light from heaven and not mix it with all the duskiness and shadows of this world. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and dive in?
This section really puts it plainly, the ways in which we mix it.
Yeah, it really does. And, once you read this section, as I say in the commentary, you can't forget it. And yet I've read this section so many times, but having to write about it, having to process it enough to communicate, a clear picture has really put me in touch with how widespread these different kinds of forgiveness to destroy are. Okay, so the section for today is section 2. Jeez. Forgiveness to destroy. And this was introduced in the previous section where he said, quote, forgiveness to destroy will overlook no sin, no crime, no guilt that it can seek and find and love. Dear to its heart is error, and mistakes loom large and grow and swell within its sight. It carefully picks out all evil things and overlooks the loving as a plague. Now, one thing I explained last week that's so important to get is that he's not describing a sort of general state of mind. The course does talk about our general state of mind in much the same terms. We look for errors, we look for evidence of sin in other people. And when we find it, it's like, aha, gotcha. Um, but this is specifically describing normal efforts to forgive. So our ordinary attempts at forgiveness reproduce that general mindset where we're looking for error and we're magnifying it in our eyes. So that's his kind of summary of forgiveness to destroy in section 1. Then in section 2, he goes through 4 forms of forgiveness to destroy, and each one of them is priceless. In the past, I found that I really related to the first one. It was so clear and so stark. And the rest of them were like, yeah, okay, those are good. But now I see how each one is a gem, a kind of a twisted gem, but still a gem. Okay, so we'll go through those 4 kinds. And if you've read the commentary, I add on a 5th, which was not really around in 1977 when this was dictated. So we'll talk about that too. Okay, number 1, deigning to save a baser person from what he truly is. In this group, first, there are the forms in which a quote better person deigns to stoop to save a, quote, baser one from what he truly is. Forgiveness here rests on an attitude of gracious lordliness, so far from love that arrogance could never be dislodged. This is so vivid, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And you get the essence of it right away, right? Your forgiveness is, you are so far above this person that your forgiveness is really an act of condescension. You are deigning to forgive this person. You're stooping down to forgive them. And they are baser, and your forgiveness attempts to save them from what they truly are, not from an illusion of what they are, but from what they actually are, which makes it sound impossible, right? It's almost like a meaningless gift, right? How can you save someone from what they truly are? He mentions an attitude of gracious lordliness. Anyway, the point is that the forgiveness doesn't just here go side by side with the condescending attitude in which you are superior and they're inferior. The forgiveness itself makes that statement, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, rewriting on me. Yeah, this one I think is, as you were saying before, one that we can absolutely see ourselves in. Who has not forgiven in this way? This is the one I Velcro to the most. I can see myself in this, and it's kind of a, as you mentioned, it's a twisted gem because it's a gem to see it, but at the same time, Jesus is calling us out so plainly on this that it's hard to feel good about bringing this to light.
I think it's because it's so vivid and colorful, it's easy to just appreciate the power of the language and see, yeah, people do that. But you have to go the extra mile and say, okay, do I do that?
Yeah,
And we'll
who
talk about
hasn't
that in the
forgiven in that
exercise.
way of, I'm going to forgive you because I'm spiritual and you're a sinner, but I'm going to just overlook who you really are and forgive you in this way. It's just, it's so condescending. And as he's saying here, it's so arrogant. And yet this is so common.
Yeah. Okay. So for each one of these, I'm going to also mention what he calls or what he's listing as the problem. And this is so succinctly said, but it's so perfect. Who can forgive and yet despise? So you're saying that you're forgiving, but it's hard to read that description and not see that you're also despising. And how do those two go together, really? And who can tell another he is steeped in sin and yet perceive him as the Son of God? So, in Jesus's view, forgiveness is all about perceiving the other person as the Son of God. Well, how can you tell him he's steeped in sin and perceive him as God's Son? And with both of these sentences, what he's saying is this forgiveness is a contradiction in terms. It's forgiveness mixed with its opposite. And that'll be a theme that we'll see throughout. Okay, we probably should move on, but do you want to say
Well,
more?
just very quickly. I mean, before we hit record, Rosalie was saying that the language in Song of Prayer is a bit more, I guess, plain spoken than some of the more loftier language that you see, particularly at the
I
end
think
of the
she was
text.
saying the other way around.
Oh, is it the other way around? Well,
Yeah.
anyway, the thing
Yeah.
that comes to mind here for me is that we really buy into the beautiful language of the course about who the other person is until they do something that really hurts us. And then we are so quick to shift into, you bastard. And then we have to hike ourselves up to a place of forgiveness, but it's not forgiveness based on all the beautiful language of the course that we loved. It's forgiveness based on, we're spiritual, we're trying to be holy, and we're going to overlook this thing in them. And it's just, again, he's just completely calling us out on this.
Yeah. Let me just add a bit onto that. I think I think there's a more kind of pernicious or insidious middle ground where you are focusing on what the Course says. You're even practicing the practices the Course gives us for forgiveness. And yet, in the back of your mind, this other program's still running. And so the two are there in your mind together. And I think that's so much of my experience. I'm saying in my mind the lines that are meant to evoke real forgiveness while I'm not realizing I'm assuming this person is my ethical and spiritual inferior. Obviously, I don't have to articulate that to myself. Anyone can see that. Um, so one is in the background, almost like running, on its own loop, while the other is in the foreground, and you don't realize the background one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is so good. We could stay here forever, but I guess we should move
Yeah.
on.
Okay. So the second one is what I'm calling forgiving the sinner because you are a sinner too. And here's what he says: the one who would forgive the other does not claim to be the better, like in the previous one. Now he says instead that here is one whose sinfulness he shares, since both have been unworthy and deserve the retribution of the wrath of God. Now, for a long time, didn't relate to this one, that much. I remember my old teaching partner, Alan Watson, saying that, he'd been in different Christian churches forever. And it was like, yeah, I totally relate to this. This is like a major thing in those contexts. But what I finally realized was we do this just maybe not in such an overtly religious form. I don't say, well, I'm a sinner too, and we both deserve the retribution of the wrath of God. I mean, who talks like that unless you're in a, very conservative church? Um, what came to me while writing the commentary is that, when you forgive, you're trying to get out of judgment, trying to let go of judgment, right? And judgment assumes you're in a higher position. I mean, to be the judge, that just implies you're standing somewhat above. So one way it seems logical, one way to let go of judgment then is to say, I can't stand above, right? I'm right down there in the mud with you. I am no better than I've done all the same stuff. So given that I'm on the exact same level as you, how can I judge? I can't. And that seems to be a really kind of logical way to let go of judgment and forgive. And yet, so we've done this, right? We've said, look, I've made the same mistake. I've done the same thing. I'm just as bad as you. I'm no better. How can I judge you? Right? We do that in a secular way, even though this is phrased in a religious way. And yet it's still forgiveness to destroy. And we'll talk about that, but looks like, Emily, you've got something to say.
Well, I was just thinking about how when we were talking about this morning, I was saying that this is the kind of forgiveness we tend to practice more with people that we like. So if we're trying to get over some kind of grievance we have with somebody who we really want to retain the relationship, we'll say some form of this. It's okay. I've done it too. No worries. We're both here in the cesspool of sin and error. But with this first one, that tends to be the kind of thing we do with people we don't like. And so it's interesting to see
Yeah.
the contrast there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Because the first one, it's like this person is so lesser. I do think we can pull off the first one in all kinds of contexts. But I like your contrast because yeah, if it's a buddy, you don't want to say, "Oh, I forgive you for that rotten thing." It's like, "Hey, man, you know, I screw up like that too."
Yeah, that is the kind of thing we say when we're trying to forgive somebody and we want to keep the relationship intact. It's all right. I've done it too. No big deal.
Yeah, yeah. So the problem with this is not that you are claiming to be the better, because you're not. The problem is now both of you are sinful. And so what he says is here the goal is to separate from God the son he loves. And that son is meant to be inclusive and keep him from his source. I think the idea is that, well, yeah, we're all screw ups. We're all quote unquote sinners. Um, but at least you have the comfort of knowing you're not the only one. That can seem like comfort. But if we're all sinners, then humanity is separated from God. And what hope do we have? The only comfort is, hey, we're all just as bad as each other.
And how spiritual is that? Like,
Yeah.
we're all over here separate from God. What good is that?
Yeah. Yeah. So this one, it's a totally different form of forgiveness to destroy, but it's still forgiveness to destroy because you're still saying to the other person, you're a sinner and you don't deserve God's love. Okay. So, number three, forgiving as the silently suffering martyr. This goal is also sought by those who seek the role of martyr at another's hand. Here must the aim be clearly seen, for this may pass as meekness and as charity instead of cruelty. Behold, how good are you who bear with patience and with saintliness the anger and the hurt another gives, and do not show the bitter pain you feel. Now, I've read this so many times, and yeah, I kind of get it. But as I was chewing on it yesterday to write the commentary, I thought, I mean, don't all those like kind of lists of the roles and families, don't they all include the martyr? And don't we talk about having a martyr complex? And as I went online and looked at different accounts of the martyr complex and the martyr role in family systems, and as I thought through the logic of this passage in the Song of Prayer, it all became really clear. And it suddenly seemed super common. The idea is people seek out, and he says, seek the role. They seek out contexts in which they get attacked a lot. They're under a lot of stress. A lot of stuff's coming their way. Got a lot of burdens and obligations. They seek that out because if they can take it and basically act good and forgiving, act like, no, that wasn't a big deal. And, I didn't even feel that one. Um, and just keep taking it, bearing it with patience and with saintliness, then the message they convey and the message that they tell themselves is, behold, how good are you? And as I was putting it all together, I thought, and this is probably the one out of the four I've related least to in the past, just reading the section. But suddenly I thought, oh my God, like I've mastered that one. I never realized it. I mean, it sounds really kind of thick, but I never got that I had been playing this role. I mean, like I wrote the handbook forever. So it's interesting how you can read these and yet not really get how applicable they are.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I so identified with the first one that as I really started to kind of go through them and prep for this class, it was like, ouch, ouch, ouch. It's like you're hitting every step on the way down,
Yeah.
bumping your head up against it because you relate to it. I love this line that you have highlighted in this paragraph. Behold, how good are you who bears with patience and with saintliness the anger and the hurt another gives, and do not show the bitter pain you feel. I mean, Jesus is just dripping with sarcasm there. Like,
Yeah, he is.
and we did, for those of you who may have seen it, we did a Facebook Live recently on the picture of crucifixion, and we'll be releasing that as a podcast soon. But the idea in that is that you're in this place of suffering that you have to show another person to send the message to them of, look what a monster you are, look what you've done to me, behold me, brother, at your hand I die. And in this, you're showing a picture of your saintliness, and you're trying to send the message of, look how good I am. And so you're constantly sending these egoic messages, but they're just taking different forms.
I think that I think the other is in this one. because he goes on to say that it shows the face of suffering and pain in silent proof of guilt. So I think with the martyr, you're doing a special version of the other where you have two levels going on. One level is it's like the attacks didn't even register. You're showing, you're not showing the bitter pain you feel at all. And that's heroic given the pain you feel. But then the other side is you're subtly letting people know that they have hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that online in some of these websites I looked at where, you're making little sarcastic comments, you're doing things to telegraph the fact that you are being damn saintly given how much pain you've sustained.
So it's another level to the picture of crucifixion, where in that you're showing them your pain and your suffering so that you can send the message that they're a monster. And here you're showing them your pain, but you're adding and aren't I good for enduring all of this? Right. So,
Yeah. You're
okay.
showing them your lack of pain and you're subtly showing them your pain both. You're putting up a front that says, I can take it. That didn't register. Didn't feel that one. And you're making sure the message gets sent subtly that you have been hurt. The bruises are there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit complicated, I think, in relation to the picture of crucifixion, but it's definitely related. Like, look at this next line. It shows the face of suffering and pain in silent proof of guilt. Well, that's straight out of the picture of crucifixion.
Mm-hmm.
So this says, such is the witness that it offers one who would be savior, not an enemy, who could be savior, not an enemy. So the problem with this is you are letting people essentially know not only how good you are, but what rats they are,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. And so with like picture of crucifixion, the idea is to show them, instead of your suffering, to show them your wholeness. And so here, that's what you're quote unquote trying to do, but it's completely fake because you're not feeling it. You're just martyring yourself. And while you're
Right.
saying the words of I'm okay, you're not, and that's on display too, to send its own message.
Yeah, I think that captures it. There's two levels. You're trying to do the forgiving thing of showing them your wholeness, but that's a facade that's covering up something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. I think lots and lots and lots of us have a lot of the martyr in us, varying degrees of the martyr. Um, and maybe haven't ever really realized it. I mean, I never watched John Bradshaw, or I probably would have gotten it. So,
You ever do what?
watched John Bradshaw? You remember John Bradshaw?
No, what is that?
Oh, you're too young. Um, he was this guy back like in the 80s, maybe 80s, 90s, who was this total celebrity championing an awareness of family systems. I mean, he was on PBS or something. I mean, there was no YouTube. And he wrote very popular books, and he just died recently, I think. But he was quite a major figure on the landscape because everybody's realizing, oh my God, that's true of my family, and I played this role. And anyway, I'm sure a lot of you remember John Bradshaw.
I see some nodding heads.
Okay. Yeah. Um, I mean, unfortunately, at that time, you were still in that family system, too young to. Anyway,
Moving
um,
on.
moving on. Okay, so number 4, forgiveness as a bargain. That's what I'm calling it. And this is the last one. Forgiveness to destroy can also take the form of bargaining and compromise. Quote, I will forgive you if you meet my needs, for in your slavery is my release. Now, we don't usually add that second part on, right? Um, but we do a lot of whether it's spoken or unspoken, right? Especially in arguments. In arguments, it's like, okay, well, I can calm down and let it go if you will just, right? You ever have one of those arguments? Um, And the meet my needs can take tons of forms. It can be if you apologize. It can be if you admit you're wrong. It can be if you show remorse, promise to make it up to me. Or it can be if you do this thing I've been wanting you to do. Or if you meet some other need of mine. The really short term, I think, is conditional forgiveness. You're saying, if I get this thing from you, then I'll forgive you. I think this is ubiquitous. It's everywhere.
But it still enslaves the other person. You and I were commenting today on how often the word slavery appears in this section. You're still bound to something. Like they're bound to the conditions of their release, and you're bound to holding them to those conditions. And in that cycle, neither one of you are healed.
Yeah, and I suspect what he says is, say this to anyone and you are a slave. And the next line, I have that here, but the very next line, which I've cut out, and my song of prayer isn't around here. Okay, the very next line says, and you will seek to rid yourself of guilt in further bargains, which can give no hope. So I think the main thing that you're enslaved to is your own guilt, because you basically said, hey, look, I'll free you, but first, you got to pony up. And you know in your heart that that's not a gift, that you are practicing some form of enslavement of them. So I think you then feel guilty. And I think that's what you're mainly slave to here.
Okay, and this idea of compromise, though, is interesting too, where you are forgiving, but you're only like you're only half forgiving. And I think you're only half forgiving in all forms of these, but at the same time here, it's like your forgiveness is contingent upon their behavior changing in some way. And that is yet another form of forgiveness I'm sure we can all see ourselves in. So we're not forgiving on the basis of the other person's holiness, the other person's true reality as God's creation, et cetera, et cetera. We are forgiving solely on the basis that they have apologized and have agreed to do things differently. And that's why we're forgiving. So completely different form.
It is, of course. And I think the compromise idea put next to the word bargaining is just like when two people are kind of far apart, then a compromise is, well, I'll give you some of what you want, but I need to get some of what I want. Right. So I'll give you forgiveness. I'll meet you halfway, but I need something here.
Right. And there's something that's not entirely unhealthy about that. I mean, we if we are on different sides and we meet in the middle on how we're going to proceed together, that's okay. I mean, that's what is marriage counseling, if not that. But at the same time, what's it resting on? It's resting on a change in behavior and not capital T truth.
Well, it's not resting on love, because love is a gift, right? And this is not a gift. And I think that's what we see with all of these is they're not love. Forgiveness is supposed to be love. And none of these are love.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we probably need to go on because I want to get to the contemporary form and just kind of spend a bit of time with that. Okay, so the essence of forgiveness to destroy, what in looking at the four different forms, what runs through all of them is the other person is seen as a sinner. That's explicit really in 1, 2, and 3. I think it's implied in 4, because in 4, if I can't forgive you unless you essentially pay your debt, you give me what I'm owed, that implies you're a sinner. So all of them see the other person as a sinner, which is not forgiveness. And all of them attack the other in different ways. Obviously saying, I require this, pay up before I'll forgive you. That's an attack. The martyr is attacking, right? With the silent message of blame being sent. The second category is an attack, because even if you say, hey, I'm just as bad as you, that that includes the idea you're bad, right? Um, so the essence of forgiveness to destroy is it sees the other as a sinner and it attacks the other. And the point is that is the antithesis of forgiveness. Forgiveness is releasing someone from the label of sinner. It's restoring them to innocence. It's wiping their slate clean. They're free of what they've done. To say, I'm setting you free, you sinner, is a contradiction in terms, right? And forgiveness is a gift. It's a blessing. It's a way of letting the other person off the hook and freeing them. But to say, I'm freeing you with this attack, again, it's a contradiction in terms. And what I realized right before class is that I had done many years ago a study on the meaning of love in the course. You know, the introduction to the course says this course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that's beyond what can be taught. And so I wanted to try to find out what was the meaning of love in the course. And in the end, it was, I mean, not that this is the true meaning that's really beyond perception, but as an intellectual understanding of the meaning of love, there wasn't a lot of mystery. As the course talked about the meaning of love in many passages and used that language, it came down to love is something that contains only love. It's not mixed with elements of not love. It's, in other words, it's pure. Love is pure love. It's not diluted. It's not contaminated with not love. And that has all kinds of implications that we would never guess if the course weren't there to tell us. But it's a similar situation to this, because here, this forgiveness that we're using is full of the opposite of forgiveness. So
Like
you could
love
see
that's mixed
why.
with attack in every
Right. In every case.
example. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, okay. So if you read the commentary, you know I'm adding a fifth form, which is this contemporary form, which is really just out there these days in the culture, especially in spiritual circles. And I've got two quotes that really capture it. They're kind of the same idea, basically. Really, they are the same idea. But the quotes are, forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person. Surely most of us have heard that, I would expect. And then the other one is, forgive others, not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. And I'm sure a lot of us have heard that as well. And both of these sound like really spiritual and kind of profound and comforting. And they're super popular. In fact, what I've done in my notes here is I took a screenshot. I went on Google and Googled forgive others, not because they deserve forgiveness, etc. And the number of internet memes that were there in the Google images is astonishing. It just goes on and on and on. And almost every single image that you see here is that exact quote. I think there's this one over here, you heal, you grow. That's not it. But I think the rest of them are that exact quote. People obviously so connect with this idea. Now, I think you can see the problem. The problem overtly says, my forgiveness is not a gift to you. You don't really matter in this whole thing. I'm the only one who matters. And it's not a gift to you because, in fact, you don't deserve forgiveness. What's important here is for me to claim my peace. After all you've done to me, I deserve peace. I can't look at those two lines without seeing, I'm sorry to put it so bluntly, the hate in them. There is such a narcissism and such anger in them, because forgiveness, historically, the very meaning of it has to do with, it's a gift you give to somebody. To say, my forgiveness has nothing to do with you, is to say, I know forgiveness is supposed to be a gift, but no gift for you. You don't deserve this gift. So I know a lot of us have probably heard these lines and maybe even thought, oh gosh, that's yeah, that sounds great. But surely we can see that this lives pretty comfortably alongside the other four forms, right? In fact, in my view, it's kind of even more extreme because the other ones were really, they were saying, this is for you, even though it was an attack. They purported to be some kind of gift. This one doesn't even acknowledge the ideal of giving to the one that we're forgiving. It's okay with saying, yeah, no gift for you. I don't even believe in that. And so it feels a bit, anyway, I'm going on and on.
Or as Lee said, the thing that was in my mind too, the old Seinfeld soup Nazi when he was like, "No soup for you, no
Yeah,
gift for
right.
you."
Yeah, right.
And the reason why I'm sitting over here almost about to bust into laughter is because before I came to the circle, I was a corporate trainer. I taught mindful leadership. And if you want to make a ballroom of heads nod, say this. And I know that for a fact because I did.
You've
I
done
was
that.
a million times. I have stood up on stage and I have said, forgive not because the other person deserves forgiveness, forgive because you deserve peace. You say that, and everyone's like, "Ooh," because it sounds
Yeah.
very profound. And then you realize as you get under the layers of it, how incredibly unloving it is. And as a result, just how in keeping it is with the self-focused nature of contemporary spirituality.
Right. There's a real pretty overt FU in there. It's not
Yeah.
that hard to see.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm watching the comments pop up here on the chat, and one thing that Kathy said that struck me is she said, when I began this journey, all I wanted was my peace. Oh my God. And so I think hopefully some light bulbs are going off here that the forgiveness journey and the spiritual journey in general isn't just about our peace. It's about so much more.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm sure, I mean, we've been going on for a while here. I'm sure the chat's somewhat full. But what you can see by the fact that he's calling out these various forms of forgiveness and calling them forgiveness to destroy, by implication, you can see what he's calling forgiveness. He sees it as something really pure, where all you see in the other person is the face of Christ, and in yourself as well. And that means their misdeeds are truly gone from your picture of who they are. Those misdeeds are just not in the picture. They are seen as your full equal with no qualifiers, no caveats. And your forgiveness is a free and joyous gift. It's not this grudging sacrifice that needs to be repaid. And I think that's overt in form number 4, but I think it's also kind of implied in the Martyr number 3. But real forgiveness, it's a beautiful gift that you enjoy giving. Okay, so we should discuss.
Yeah, I know. And we always say that we hope to have enough time to
I
open
know,
it
I know.
up, and I don't think we're going to have time to do that today, but we do have a lot of things in the chat, and I know you have an exercise. So we'll get to the exercise after a couple of
Yeah,
questions from the chat.
yeah.
Andrea is saying, isn't this all an example of the split mind?
Well, you could say so, yeah, because in this course, the split mind is specifically split between love and hate. That's the real nature of the split. And this kind of forgiveness exemplifies that very split.
Lynn is saying, what do you think of the idea that we're all sinners continues to feed into the Christian addiction to guilt and repentance in our culture?
It does, although I think, of course, absolutely, but I think that most of the culture has moved on to um, to the narcissism in what I'm calling number 5. So yeah, that addiction to sin is there, but I think it's largely kind of it's quarantined within, church circles. I think the rest of the culture is more in that number 5.
How do you hold the idea of unconditional forgiveness without having a doormat mentality?
Well, one of the big messages for me here is that this only makes sense in light of the Course's view of true reality. If you try to do this without a higher view of what reality is, you're going to fall into all kinds of problems. Um, and I do think that when we're in touch with that higher reality, we can forgive and show extreme kindness, and there can be appropriate barriers that are good for both parties. I don't think they're enforced with anger. I don't think they're like, that's my big, mental health victory. They're just matter of fact and practical.
Yeah, one thing that Marianne Williamson has said recently, and I like the idea of it, is that we can hold people in a version of spiritual quarantine where we see them in the light of who they truly are. We hold them in love, but at the same time, we have some physical distance from them, and we can, that's, it seems to me like an idea, a way to hold both of these ideas at once, where you can have some kind of boundary while at the same time applying course-based forgiveness to somebody that you need to forgive.
And I think it's understood that you need that boundary because you're still like young in the ways of forgiveness and love.
Right.
So it's something you need now, not because they're a monster, but just where you're both at, it's kind of needed.
Yeah, and the idea of spiritual quarantine, there's just something about that that I like. It's, we know that you're going to come out of quarantine at some point, but for right now,
Mm, mm,
you're in this place, and I'm holding you with love, but you have some healing to do. And so, anyway,
mm. Yeah, good point.
Michael says, assuming we are not that evolved yet, isn't the more honest reaction to show the pain of what we are really feeling? Or should we just not have the conversation with the person who hurt us until we arrive at a better place?
Yeah, no kidding. I've been, I've stood before that question many, many, many times. Um, I think there is a place for honesty. I don't think what he's talking about here is not so much a conversation strategy as something to practice within, right? He wants us to go for this kind of pure, unconditional forgiveness. And once we've reached that, then all these questions I think answer themselves. But along the way, how much do you say, I've been really in pain over this? And then when you say that, do you add, I know this is, it's because of how I'm perceiving things. Um, I just think navigating through those things is going to be a bit complicated along the way. And I'm not sure I know all the answers. Well, I don't on that level.
Well, part of what you bump up against is the other person's willingness to engage in a conversation around it. I mean, if they're just in a place of complete unwillingness to participate in some kind of conversation around what all this means, then you're hitting a brick wall. And so what do you do at that point? Um,
You're right. It's a good point. So much of this, I mean, conversation is a two-way street. So much of this is what conversation can be had that's constructive given where they're at and you're at.
right. So if your level of willingness is high and their level of willingness is low, well, then here comes a spiritual quarantine.
Yeah. And sometimes I think both of you are somewhat willing, but you're in such different spaces that it's not going to work then.
Okay, last question from Patty, and then we'll do the exercise. I know you have a really good one today. And Patty is saying, how do we hold this in view of the fact that the Course says that they didn't do anything, but obviously in these bodies it feels like they really did. So how do we
Yeah.
hold those two things at once?
Yeah. I mean, the Course routinely acts like they attacked you. If you look at its discussions of forgiveness, um, it tends to be assumed someone behaviorally attacked you. That's how this world goes. That we shouldn't be surprised that the Course would act like that. Um, it would just add, the attack didn't have real power, didn't represent who they really are, didn't have power to hurt you. It needed you to interpret it a certain way. It took place in a dream. Etc. So the Course is surrounding, they attacked you with all these other interpretations, but none of them erase the fact that, chances are, sometimes we just make it all up, of course, but chances are they attacked you. Let's not, sidestep that. Let's just reinterpret it.
Okay.
Okay. We really could keep talking about this. I mean,
I know someone's asking for classes to be an hour and a half, but
I don't know. But the problem with that is that then other people, that's what Mary Ann's doing, of course.
yeah,
And then people drop off and that's okay. But anyway,
we do
cut
too many classes.
back. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take us through an exercise here. Okay, so this is going to take us through these 4 forms that Jesus lays out. Okay, and you can write answers, but I think it's fine just to, this is kind of conceived as an eyes closed exercise. So go ahead and close your eyes, get comfortable. Begin by asking yourself just as honestly as you can, when you forgive others, do you typically see them as your full equal, or as ethically or spiritually inferior to you? To the extent you answered the latter, seeing them as inferior, say to yourself, this makes my forgiveness an attack. How can I forgive and yet despise? Do you ever find yourself forgiving by saying to another, I'm just as bad as you. I've done the exact same thing. Realize that you have now condemned both of you. So ask yourself, can I condemn God's sons and still remember him? Can I condemn God's sons and still remember him? Do you play the martyr, the long suffering one who acts like all the attacks are nothing, but who secretly collects all the bruises as badges of your goodness? Ask yourself, is this love? Or is it rather treachery to one, the other person, to one who needs salvation from the pain of guilt? So again, is this love, or is it rather treachery to one who needs salvation from the pain of guilt? Do you ever subtly let people know that you will forgive them only once they in some way meet your needs? By apologizing, admitting they were wrong, making it up to you, changing their ways, etc. If so, say to yourself, bargaining like this makes me a slave to guilt. Bargaining like this makes me a slave to guilt. All right. Amen. You can open your eyes whenever you want.
Amen.
I
Well,
would love to hear if anybody had any light bulbs. I know we're just about out of time.
I
Where
was
were you going to
just
go?
about to say the same thing.
Okay, sorry.
We are at the top of the hour, but for those of you who have to drop off, please do so. But for those of you who would like to speak or would like to share any insights that you've had from today's class, you are welcome to do so. Let me give you the power to unmute yourself if you would like to, or you're welcome. Just unmute yourself or feel free to raise your hand.
May I ask a question, please? It's Terry.
Hey,
Hi,
Terry.
Terry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
All right. Incredible session today. It's so thought-provoking, isn't it? It's so challenging. I mean, one of the things that came to mind is the gospel teaching, you know, where Jesus says, or is reputed to have said, he without sin cast the first stone. And, you know, in the context, particularly in that second one, you know, that you're talking about, you know, it's difficult. I'm trying to get my head around all these principles. Some I'm really on board with, you know, and it makes perfect sense. And others, it's a lot more challenging. You know, and I think it is a process, you know. So it's a great session, Robert. You've really got me to think kind of outside the box today. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really interesting point because that saying, it sounds just like number 2, doesn't it? And I mean, I'm sure you may know, I expect you know that story was floating around independently, and finally someone just stuck it in the Gospel of John. It was just sort of this orphan. I don't think a lot of scholars take that as gospel, that story, even though, like, you got to love the story. So I'm not sure what to do with it either.
Thank you,
Yeah, thank
Terry.
you.
Rosalie, you had something you wanted to add?
Just a question, and thank you very much. This class, I'll piggyback on Terry's comments, was really thought-provoking. Thank you both. I understand Robert's point that Jesus really wants us to look at this from the basis of what is real from the Course's perspective. And yet, the exercise, you asked the question, who would like to share? Well, guess what? I'm on all 4 of them. And actually, I'm in the 5th one, too. I could have used a little exercise, so you might want to tack that one in.
I felt a bit presumptuous adding mine onto
Oh,
his.
no, I thought that it would, well, and this is my comment. I'm in the point that I recognize that I'm not where Jesus wants me to be. I'm becoming more and more aware, and I'm practicing the process of forgiveness. And I can identify myself with those 5 of them because I have said myself, this is about what the Course is about, finding peace. So the contemporary view of it's not about you, it's about my peace is very. So that being said, can you comment on how we forgive ourselves in this process of growth? When I feel I want to give myself a pity party and be a martyr, and I know I'm doing it to myself, and I allow myself an hour of that or whatever, and then I try to snap out of it. What can you say to us to help us through the process of forgiving in the form that Jesus wants us to forgive?
Yeah, well, some of that will be addressed in the next section
Oh,
3.
I'm always good about that, aren't I?
Yeah. But what I would say is we just have to, I think, set this as the goal, a forgiveness that is so pure that it just sees the face of Christ in the other person, sees them as our full equal, etc. And along the way, it's a goal. We won't get there right away. And how do we forgive ourselves along the way? The Course's attitude is, yes, we should work on that too. And because we deserve the same forgiveness that we should give them. But also it says the best way to forgive yourself is forgive them. Because the idea is a principle that you think applies to this person, this person, this person, this person, this person. At some point you'll say, I guess it must apply to me too.
Would that be a corollary to fake it till you make it?
Not so much. I think that here the notion is a principle that applies in one place should apply everywhere. So if you apply it in one place after another, you'll eventually learn to apply it or be willing to apply it in the last place perhaps you are truly, able to apply it, and that's yourself. I think we let ourselves off the hook really easily with a kind of superficial forgiveness of ourselves, but the deep forgiveness, I think we're deeply reluctant to do, and we're going to have to basically apply it everywhere until one day we say, okay, how can I be the exception to everybody?
Thank you, Rosalie.
Thank you.
And we'll wrap with Esther. I know you have your hand raised.
I just have to say this is very exciting. This is very exciting because I fit into all 5 of these, and my eyes have been open. And I have not been forgiving by seeing the other as the face of Christ. And that's exciting because it's a starting point. And, I'm not worrying about forgiving myself because this is the starting point, and focusing on how to forgive in this way, course-directed forgiveness, is a wonderful insight. It's a wonderful insight, and I thank you for this teaching. I feel like I'm the happy learner. I'm excited to see this, just to see it, and to move forward with the help of the Holy Spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther.
Gosh,
Yeah,
so much of what you said spoke for me too. Go ahead, Emily.
No, I was just gonna say, I've been sitting here for the last hour with this big smile on my face about these teachings, and some of them are pretty dark. But at the same time, it's like, how can you not be like stupidly excited about this idea? Because once you get it, it gives you the capacity to change in ways that are truly healing for all of our relationships. And as our relationships heal, the world will heal. I mean, that's the plan of salvation. And so it's so what a gift it is to be here together and to be able to do this and bring hopefully true light and true healing to the world that desperately needs it. Oh,
can I just say one thing?
Sure.
The class was fantastic. I loved it.
Oh, thank you, Peggy.
As for the Bible verse about he without sin cast the first stone, I've always liked that. I've always loved that, really. And whether or not Jesus actually said that, I don't know. But he talks throughout the course. Of course, it's about forgiveness, but it's about not judging. And we don't always put those together, being non-judgmental and being forgiveness as the same thing. But I think the lesson he was trying to teach was about judgment.
Mm-hmm.
So not to judge.
Thank you, Peggy. I really appreciate that.
I think just one little comment about that Bible verse. I think the reason after floating around independently, someone just stuck it in the Gospel of John is everyone loved it. Like no one wanted to lose it.
And I know I said if people are dropping off left and right.
Yeah.
So if you want to drop off, please do. But I see some new faces here, and I want to make space for you to talk. So Jochen, I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, but we'd love to hear from you before we close.
Okay. That's a difficult name to pronounce in English, so it's Joachim.
Joachim, God, I really butchered that.
Yeah.
I'll get that right next time, I promise.
Yeah, for me, the light bulb is not so much a new insight, but also a new question, because it seems to me that if I really truly want to forgive, yeah, I have to come from a place where, yeah, I am light itself. So if I'm not really enlightened myself, how can I truly forgive? How do I not forgive to destroy if I'm not already, some kind of enlightened or something like that? So for me, it almost seems impossible to avoid forgiveness to destroy.
I think it is, to be really honest. I think we're going to mix some of that into our forgiveness efforts, despite our best intentions. There's a line in the manual where he says, one sin forgiven by one teacher of God perfectly would save the whole world. Well, that's not happening. So we don't get forgiveness yet. It is a bit out of our reach, but on the journey, hopefully we weed out those forgiveness to destroy elements more and more and more.
Right.
May I say something also, Emily?
Sure.
This is Shanti. There's a line in the Course where Jesus says, resign now as your own teacher. And also he says, you have learning handicaps in a very literal sense. And he's always encouraging us to ask for help. We cannot correct ourselves. He's always guiding us to the Holy Spirit that is the answer within us and is still connected to God. And so I spend a lot of time asking for help because I can see the problem with my ego and unforgiveness. I ask for help. I ask for the ability to be able to forgive, because I am not my own teacher. I cannot correct myself. I have to ask for the mercy of God, which is in the Holy Spirit, and to whom Jesus directs us at the end of the text. So I'm constantly asking for help. That's my job, to ask for help. So
that's great.
That's the right thing, Shanti.
And I think you've essentially read Jesus's mind, because the next section is so much about that. Yeah.
Okay, well, we should close. Thank you so much for all of your comments and questions. I'm so glad that we created this space. See, we are getting closer to an hour-and-a-half class all the time. And so we look forward to seeing you again next Friday for our next Song of Prayer class. In the meantime, thank you so much for being here. Bye for now. Thank you. Bye-bye.
God's love.
Bye.
Thank you.